between January 2014 and March 2015, they've recorded 3,000 civilian deaths, while recording at the same time only the deaths of 35 fighters.
3,000 civilian deaths in northern Aleppo just last year, more than 11,000 in Syria since 2012, according to Amnesty International. A 99% civilian casualty rate over a time frame of just 15 months. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is either very good at killing civilians or he's very bad at targeting fighters. Joining us now on the hard line, Middle East expert and former Pentagon official, now resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, Michael Rubin. Mike, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Do we need to call this what this is? This is just right now on a global scale. If you were to look at all the various places where there are fights right now, this is wanton genocide.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's genocide, only because I'm pretty precise with that term. But it's wanton mass murder across the board. But this is nothing new inside Syria. You know, we talk about the rise of the Islamic State. We talk about American airstrikes. But we forget for about 3 years before the Americans started airstrikes, the Islamic State had its capital at Raqqa. The only people flying planes at the time were the Syrian Air Force, but they preferred to drop barrel bombs on civilians rather than take on ISIS in its own headquarters.
Let me talk about that for a minute here, because you're talking about barrel bombs. Let's make sure everyone knows what we're talking about here. These are containers that are packed with explosives and projectiles. They are dropped from helicopters. You have pieces, actually, that are embedded in these barrel bombs that come out of them and are slicing human flesh on a regular basis, including children, Mike. I mean, that's the thing. We're not seeing a lot of these graphic images of the kids. Does the world need to see more of these images in order to make them understand what's happening, the level of killing?
Well, you know, if I had two criticisms of the press, that would be one of them. The fact that we censor the images in order to give a sterilized version of what's going on. My other complaint about the press is just the pathological use of the passive voice, where 50 civilians were killed, but we don't go through the effort of actually saying who killed them. And that's another way in which we avoid associating the evil that's going on with the people perpetrating it.
Is that the biggest issue here that we're talking about, is the fact that this is incredible evil, a level of evil here that Bashar al-Assad has at his fingertips in Syria, but the world for some reason still doesn't want to see it. They still want to gloss it.
Well, ultimately that's the case, and we're very good at glossing things over when we don't want to actually have to address them. Maybe we can agree to discuss them at a five-star hotel in Geneva or at the United Nations, but ultimately that's just an excuse for doing nothing. Perhaps the world thinks still he's a Western-educated eye doctor, therefore he has to actually have some sort of moderation inside him, sort of like maybe Papa Doc Duvalier in Haiti or Banda in Malawi. It's just a falsehood, but it's one of these things that we oftentimes kid ourselves into.
What we are now hearing out of Syria is that there is a severe manpower shortage. Let's face it, he's running out of troops at this point, and he's running out of people to start going out and killing innocent civilians here. Is it possible that in a situation like that, because even Bashar al-Assad has said that he's losing key parts of Syria right now, that we could see something even more dramatically evil? I mean, let's face it, when you get to a despot and they're basically at the end of their rope and they've got to kill somebody on the way out, you could see something that would make this look like a cakewalk.
Well, in some cases, certainly that could be the case, but you know what I'm afraid of is the opposition at this point is just as bad as Bashar al-Assad. When the definition of moderate among the Syrian opposition does not engage in cannibalism, you know that you've gone pretty far. So ultimately, we're in a situation where we've had 4 years of polarization. All we have left is the extremists. They might be extremists of different flavors, but ultimately the civilians are going to pay the price. At the same time, we've been here before. We've seen Assad on the ropes. We've seen Hezbollah and Iran come to his aid, and ultimately we might see the same sort of thing again.
Do you fear that even though Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the others are against him, that somehow, some way, as this administration seeks to create a peaceful settlement with so many other terrorist groups around the world, that the Obama administration may try to soften this, may try to save this guy again?
Well, ultimately, I think that is what will happen. You know, the Obama doctrine in many ways is snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And so, just to be consistent, I wouldn't be surprised. But
that's abominable, though, Mike. That is, I can't think of a better word for that. If you have somebody who's killing women and children, and yet we're going to help keep him in power.
Well, the ultimate irony and the ultimate cynicism would then have to be Samantha Power, President Obama's United Nations ambassador, who built a career on condemning this sort of complacency on the part of government in the face of genocide and mass murder, and in this case seems to be doing what those whom she criticized did, which is just keeping her mouth shut for the sake of personal ambition.
I got about a minute left here then. Let's bring this down to a solution. Other than sending in bombers, other than sending in troops, other than invading a sovereign nation, as much as we can't stand them, we understand it's a sovereign nation, what is it that we should, not can, what is it that we should be doing right now, Michael?
Well, ultimately, a no-fly zone is step one. The fact of the matter is you wouldn't be dropping barrel bombs if you couldn't fly your aircraft. They're not fighting the radicals and Al-Qaeda with these aircrafts. Therefore, they simply don't need to be flying them at all. That's step one. Step two is to look at Operation Provide Comfort back in 1991 as a model. That's when we created a safe haven for the Kurds. This was discussed by Secretary of Defense Ash Carter today. The discussions need to continue. It's not going to be resolved at the diplomatic table.
Is this president scared?
I think this president is completely disinterested and somehow thinks that we're going to fill the vacuum with some sort of altruistic force if we step away. Might as well believe in unicorns.
Needs to see more of the graphic pictures. I imagine you've seen them. I know I've seen some of them as well. They're horrifying, aren't they?
Absolutely.
There are women and children dying, and we're not doing anything about it, at least not anything substantive at this point. Michael Rubin, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for bringing us a little bit of the insight here that unfortunately other people seem to want to just cover up. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Despicable indeed. Another city, another Justice Department investigation into police practices. And this is all as a long, hot summer approaches. Stay with us. The fastest 60 minutes of news talk. This is The Hard Line.